So to start off, I have a beautiful image just showing some great textures here, which is just an image that I got from Apple. But I'll be talking generally about careers in earth sciences. And so here, coming from South Africa, of course, mining and exploration is a huge part of our economy. And as a result, a lot of the geology programs in South Africa focus on exploration and mining. And so we've already heard a lot now about what a resource geologist does, but my background is more in fundamental research. And so I'll be talking about some career options within research and some related fields to that. So my research career started at the University of Cape Town. I received my master's there in 2008. I then moved to Canada to do my PhD at the University of Alberta. I've also been affiliated with Carnegie in Washington, DC, and most recently I worked at the GIA, the Gemological Institute of America in New York. So a lot of my research is focused on diamonds and also their host rocks in the mantle, so eclogites, peridotite, and my research is focused on understanding how we can use these types of samples to understand how the oldest continents formed, and also how this can then inform exploration models. So how can we expand diamond exploration models so that we can potentially target specific types of diamonds? So a lot of my research has been in the lab. So taking samples like this, diamonds and their host rocks, breaking them down into their components, doing a lot of chemistry in the lab and analyzing them to determine the age of diamonds, the age of their host rocks, and as a result, the age of the oldest continents. So we want to know how diamonds form, why diamonds form, where, all of those things. So a lot of my work has been using different analytical techniques. So I'm very familiar with electron microscopy, but I've also done a lot of work using mass spectrometers in order to analyze the isotopes within these samples. So that's just sort of a broad overview of what my research career has been, but I'll just give you some examples of career options that you may not have thought about or may not have been exposed to. The Earth being where it is right now, we should probably move away from oil, gas, and fossil fuels, right? And focus more on climate science. And so coming out of an earth science degree, a lot of earth science degrees potentially have a focus on oil, gas, and fossil fuels and petroleum geology. But there's also atmospheric sciences, and there's many earth science programs that focus on climate science. And so we all know about the IPCC report that came out in the last week or so. And so really emphasizing why research into fundamental climate science is important, so that we can model climate change and also understand how we can mitigate the damage that has been done by many things, potentially also oil, gas, fossil fuel industries. And so there's many options for doing climate science research. And I'll just highlight a few. You can go onto their websites if you wanted to learn more, because there's too much detail here to really convey right now. And so one good example is you can go into the EPA website, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, and they have many options and highlight different climate science research initiatives. And you can also see there how that can influence science policy at a high level, so that governments can implement change into mitigating the damage that has been done through climate change. Moving on. So another option within coming out of a research career is working with national funding bodies and also working and being involved with science policy. So coming out of a PhD in earth sciences enables you then to not necessarily go into an academic career at a university, but potentially take your research knowledge and research experience and take it to a place where you can enable other people to do research, such as a national funding body, or where you can influence science policy at a governmental level. And so even if you don't end up in a fundamental research career, there are still places that you can go where you can be involved in science and make a positive difference. And so I've highlighted here just some examples of organizations where you can work at funding bodies. So for example, here in South Africa, the National Research Foundation. In the US, there's the National Science Foundation. And you can go onto their websites and then see the kind of work that they do, the types of programs that they have, and the types of research that they support. So for example, the National Science Foundation has various programs within earth sciences, and you can potentially work at these funding bodies and help control the types of work that gets funded and the types of research that gets done. In terms of science policy, for example, the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, they do a lot of outreach programs, and they also have a lot of information on their website about how you can educate yourself about science policy and science communication. And they also highlight some career options within the general field of science policy and science funding. So a field that I've always found fascinating, but have never personally gotten into it, is space exploration and planetary science. So we all know that we've seen all the private space companies that have been launching rockets to space. And this is because potentially they want to go, well, we know they want to go to the moon within the next 10 years, but they're also looking to expand their capabilities to see if they could potentially go to Mars in the future. So hopefully you won't be Matt Damon chilling by yourself on the surface of Mars. Hopefully there'll be a bit more of a support network there for you. But a lot of planetary science today is focused around, or people start off doing research into meteorites. And so here I've just shown a few images of meteorites. And so meteorites help you then understand really just the geology of other planets. So it's really just a rock from another planet, and you're studying other planets within our solar system to understand how those planets formed and how their formation processes are different to that of Earth, and potentially also what capabilities there are, for example, meteorite mining, which is something that people are looking into. And so coming out of a geology degree or an undergrad in geology, you can do a postgraduate, like master's or PhD in planetary science, where you study meteorites, and then that opens you up into going into broader planetary science fields. So for example, ASU, Arizona State, has a Center for Meteorite Studies. So you can go do a postgraduate research into meteorites. And then you can work at various different places. So not just NASA, which has great PhD and postdoc opportunities and also funding opportunities, but also SpaceX. First Mode is looking at developing technologies and capabilities to expand space exploration. And so I know someone who did a PhD in earth science, did a postdoc also studying meteorites, and then went on to work for a company that does meteorite exploration. So what she does is her contribution is because she understands meteorites and planetary geology really well. Her projects that she was involved with was understanding what can we mine from meteorite, and understanding all the processes involved with that. And so within space exploration, there's various options, but I've also just shown here the Antarctic meteorite program. So a lot of researchers that work in planetary science want to go to Antarctica, for example, to hunt for meteorites, because a lot of the research programs, of course, need access to samples. And so there's people that curate the meteorites. For example, let me just go back one slide. Here at the Smithsonian, here's Chris Hurd at the University of Alberta. So there's people that curate meteorite collections that are then available for people to study. And so that is a way that you can go from earth science or from a geology undergrad. You can go on to do postgraduate studies, studying meteorites and understanding planetary science. And then you can go on into space exploration industries, which are very interesting. I also found this JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. They have a lot of internship programs as well, which may be interesting. So the last 7 years or so, I worked at the Gemological Institute of America in New York. And so gemstones and jewelry is another interesting field that you can go into, either as a research career, but potentially also just working within the gem trade. So even just an undergrad in geology, you can go on to do a gemological diploma at any of these gem labs that enable you then to understand the non-destructive identification of gemstones. And you can then work within the larger gem trade, either as a dealer or as a jeweler. So there's many options. So during my time at GIA in New York, I worked as a research scientist. So I brought my fundamental research experience, research into earth science and the formation of natural diamonds into the gem lab environment. And so the research team at GIA, what we did was try to understand the differences between natural diamonds, synthetic diamonds, and treated diamonds. So you can make a diamond any color you want in the lab. You can grow a diamond in the lab, or you can mine a diamond. And so all of these three categories of diamonds make their way into the diamond trade. And so we need to very accurately be able to tell the difference between these three categories, because there is a massive price difference between the three. And so all of these gem labs, that's their main business, is issuing reports that state whether a diamond or a colored stone or colored gemstones, such as ruby, sapphire, emerald, whether they're natural, synthetic, or treated. But most of these gem labs also have an education component, and that's where you can do your gem diploma, for example, that gives you a little bit more knowledge then about the gem trade. So coming from a fundamental science degree such as geology, where you have a strong mineralogy background, that sets you up really well for a career in the gem trade, because actually what I found is that many people in the gem trade don't necessarily have an earth science or mineralogical background. And so I think it's great if you can combine the two, where you have a strong fundamental knowledge about the origin of minerals and gemstones, and you can then apply that to the gem trade. And so certainly there's many job options then within these, for example, just you can go into the websites for these different companies, see what they do and see what the different career options are then within gem and jewelry industries. Another interesting field that I've discovered through fundamental research is working at museums. And this is maybe not something that we're too familiar with here in South Africa, where we don't have really world-class international standard museums. But in DC, they have the National Museum of Natural History. So they have a large mineral collection, large rock and ore collection, and they have curators that work to build those collections, to take care of those collections, and also you can learn samples from these museums for research. And so this is actually a very interesting career choice, because it merges a few different things. You can do fundamental research, you can do your curation of samples within the collections, but you also do a lot of outreach. And so you get to communicate your science and get other people excited about science when you work at a museum. For example, getting children excited about science from an early age is very important if we want to have more people go into STEM careers at a university level. And so here's the Natural History Museum in the UK, in London. Similarly, they also have great mineral rock and gem collection. They have a great meteorite collection. And so you can go on their website and just explore the different things that they do, the different collections that they have within earth science, but also within other scientific fields. And also learn a bit about the types of people that work there. So often these are people that have PhDs, but also not necessarily. So often the head curators have PhDs, but people that work with them don't necessarily, but they still get to help curate the collections, which is a very important thing within our field. So another interesting career option that I've sort of come across is science journalism. So Columbia Journalism School, they have a master's program in science journalism that then sets you up really well if you have an undergrad in science, specifically earth science or geology. You can then go on to do postgraduate work in science journalism. And that then enables you to, to work at various places. BBC and the New York Times both have pages dedicated only to scientific stories and what the latest news is coming from different research fields. There's also The Conversation, which has various academics write articles in order to communicate their science most effectively. And so I think now with COVID, we've all become aware of how important it is to have people who understand fundamental science really well and who can communicate that in an effective manner so that non-experts can understand. So I actually think this is a very exciting career option, and you can use an undergrad degree in earth sciences. And even if you don't necessarily become a journalist, still having the skills to effectively communicate your science is very important. And of course, everyone has a podcast these days. And so there's a lot of podcasts about not just earth science, but also science in general. And what highlighting the latest exciting discoveries that have been made across different scientific fields. And I think this is the last one. Another interesting option that I've discovered is academic publishing. And so if there are a number of journals that have full-time editorial staff. So for example, Nature and Science both have full-time editorial staff that work for them. So people that have come from a full-time research background, potentially after their postdoc, go then and work for a journal like this. So they're the full-time editorial staff that are responsible for a certain subject field, and then they deal with the paper submissions that come in for that specific field. And so I think the reason you need a PhD for this is because you need to be aware of what the latest research in your field is, so that you can effectively edit and review new research. But there's also journals that don't necessarily have full-time editorial staff, but where you work for them sort of part-time pro bono, which is what a lot of scientists do in journals where you volunteer your time to edit and review papers. But that is not what I'm talking about. It's actually, there's some journals which have full-time editorial staff. And this is actually a very interesting way to still stay within a research field, but to not actually do the research yourself, because you go to conferences, you need to stay abreast of the latest research so that you know where a field is headed, so that you can publish only the best science. So there we go. I've hopefully just given you sort of a broad overview of some career options that you may not have necessarily thought of coming out of an earth science degree. Certainly after I finished my undergrad in geology here in South Africa, I had a view, and it was maybe my own fault because I didn't read enough, but I certainly had a view that my only option was exploration and mining. But I sort of found my niche more in research, and within research, there's so many diverse options. You don't necessarily have to become a university professor, but you can take your research skills and apply that to other fields as well. So there we go. Thank you very much.